Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here on my next Sword Art Online episode review. This one's going to be my overview review for the Sword Art Online 2 Phantom Bullet arc, so episode 1 to 14 of the anime. And, the main thing I want to say about this is that I do really like this arc. I think it is a really good arc. I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite arc from SAO II, because I, I'm really interested to see how I feel about Mother Rosario when I get to that in these reviews. But I like this one. I like the change of game. I like the kind of setup for why the change of game happens. I like the focus on Kirito and Sinon as the kind of two main characters, and the villain and what they play with all of that happening. If I had any problems, it would be some of the pacing was a little off. There were a few episodes every now and then when I already felt like they were kind of just covering the same ground they covered in previous episodes, or they were just taking a long time to kind of get to the point. It kind of felt like they had a certain amount of story that they wanted to fit into a certain amount of episodes, and they were kind of running low on stuff to fit into episodes, so they kind of just kind of padded it out a little bit. Um, so some pacing problems aside, I thought it was a really good arc. I don't really have anything majorly negative to say. I know there are people out there who don't necessarily like this arc a lot just because a lot of our characters from SAO aren't really in it that much. Like Asuna's not in it that much. Silica, Lisbeth, those type of characters, Klein. But in terms of one of the most focused arcs, basically Kirito, Kyoji, Death Gun, Sinon, they're the main characters here. In terms of just a really small cast, focused arc, this is really well done, devoting a lot of time to not a massive amount of things. Like, one thing I commented on in nearly every episode during this arc was how nearly every episode there was only like 4 or 5 scenes in every episode. They had a lot of really long scenes, establishing character relationships, explaining what's going on, which I definitely appreciated. But some of them just a little bit repetitive. Um, so before I get into some of the heavy specific points on the arc, I will just cover some of my thoughts on the Sword Art Online Phantom Bullet light novel, the first part, which is volume 5 of the light novels. Volume 6, which is the other half of the arc, isn't out yet in English. I don't think it's out until like November or December. Well, I'll be getting that book when it comes out. So this light novel covers the start of the Phantom Bullet arc right up until the very end of Kirito and Sinon's fight in the preliminaries. Basically, just before the Bullet of Bullet tournament happens. And what surprised me was that, for the most part, the anime adapts this perfectly, basically. I think I noted, like, every scene in this is in the anime in some form or another. The main difference is basically just the difference in medium. Because this is a novel, they can do things with some of the descriptions on things that the anime can't necessarily do. So one example would be this light novel goes into a lot of depth on explaining basically the way pro players work in Gun Gale Online. They mentioned this in like a line or two in the anime that, oh, Zexy was a pro gamer, he basically lived off the game. If you're good enough and devote enough time to the game, you can basically make a living off the game. That's all they say about it. This goes into depth in like explaining this is how much the kind of monthly connection fee for the game is. This is how much money like above average players who play in their spare time make. And they say like it's basically they make enough to cover like half of the connection cost. But the pro players who basically have to devote a lot of their time to playing the game can make about 200, 300,000 yen off playing the game, which isn't that much to make a living, but it's enough to like live very meagerly and stuff like that. So a few little details like that. They go into more depth on Osuda's past, basically just a sequence of events after the post office scene, just explaining how she came to kind of live on her own and kind of be under the care of her kind of grandparents and like away from the town where that actually happened in. and how she was actually friends with the bullies initially, but they were using her, and they kind of came to stay in her house and were kind of definitely taking advantage of her. And she initially was just kind of like, I want friends, so I'm okay with this. But then they got super crazy one day and she had to call the police, and that's when the bullies turned on her. That's probably the only scene that isn't covered in the anime at all, establishing that Asuna was once friends with the bullies, but they were constantly using her before that. And when we meet her in the anime, she's basically already distanced herself from them, but they still pick on her because after she called the police on them, that's when they went to look up stuff on her and found out about the whole incident in her past, her shooting someone. So those bullies are the reason everyone in her class basically knows about the whole gun thing. And they just explain that. Something I mentioned in my last review was that they also mentioned some details like the fact that Asuda's glasses, she doesn't actually need them for vision purposes. They're just frames with bulletproof glass in them. They just explain that here, where in the anime, I don't see any point at which that would naturally come up. It's a kind of odd fact for like some character just to say, or inner dialogue of Asuda just to mention. So there's that. And then the only other thing that I think is really notable is that they go into a little bit more depth on the scene where Kikuoka and Kirito basically start explaining what the case is before Kirito dives into Gun Gale Online. The scene is a lot more expanded out in the light novel because they go into a lot more depth in terms of Kirito and him going back and forth as to like these are the various ways in which there's the potential for someone to kill someone in the real world from in the game. Like they go through all of the senses and they're just like, could they do this to create this smell and kill someone this way? Could they make someone vomit by doing this? Could it be a sound? And they basically go through it and then come to the same conclusion as the anime that logically there's no way that this could happen. Given that everyone's using the atmosphere now and not the nerve gear, there's no way that it could possibly happen. And then they go to a little bit more depth on this idea at the start, kind of I suppose, VMMORPG players taking things to the extreme. They explain that Kikuoka works for obviously the virtual reality kind of division of the government, and he kind of explains that. So I end up hearing about basically every crime case around these games, and some people would think that there's a real problem with this because a few people have been in real life robbed because of things that happened in the game. There's been a few confrontations, like one person went on a killing spree over what happened. Plus there's been SAO, ALO, and now this death gun incident. And they kind of just go over the fact that like, yes, but compared to like a lot of other things, that is like 2 or 3 incidents ever compared to everything else. And the positives of this world is better than the negatives that happen. But Kirito understands why there's the need for this kind of virtual reality division, virtual world division, I suppose, and kind of that explains a little bit about why he helps a lot more. Other than that, I'd say a lot of it's fairly to the point after that. The fights, the meeting with Death Gun, stuff like that are all basically word for word, scene for scene. Kirito explaining changing games to Asuna, exactly the same. They explain a little bit more about kind of the details around how she first got the Hecate gun, but you basically get that scene at the start. She basically found a monster, a boss that was really hard to defeat, found a spot where it couldn't hit her, and kind of cheesed the boss to get the gun. So that's all there is really is to say about the light novel. I really liked reading it, of course. Just those little extra details made it definitely worthwhile. Just to see like that it was a little bit different than basically the other adaptations where there was extra scenes that weren't in the anime and so on. Whereas this one was like, there's a little bit of extra stuff, but it's not really too bad. But let's get into some specifics on the Phantom Bullet arc now itself. I think definitely the highlight is the dual kind of focus of the same issue with our 2 main characters. Kirito and Sinon both dealing with the fact that they've killed people in the past and it kind of coming up here. what I like on Kirito's side of things is that they're constantly referencing back to Sword Art Online Aincrad. That it wasn't just that arc's over now, 13 episodes. It's always something the fans keep saying, that I wish we got more Aincrad and stuff like that. But the series never forgets that SAO, that incident, will always be the most kind of big, meaningful incident that's happened to these characters. And in this case, they bring up the concept that they kind of glossed over a little bit in Sword Art Online, mainly because when it happened, Kirito was protecting Asuna and they were kind of setting up their relationship. But the fact that Kirito killed people, we saw him kill Kuradil in the game. Uh, I suppose he's kind of responsible for the death of Kayaba, but not really. But then they established here that there was also this. That you get a new SAO incident that happened. The assault team leading an attack on Laughing Coffin to basically get that menace out of the game and stop other people being killed. And basically, you have the good players in the game having to resort to killing to save everyone else. And this straight away setting up this idea of, you do these kind of tough, bad things to protect people, and it doesn't kind of forgive you for it, but it's enough to make you not be kind of just it's enough to kind of make it so that you're not consumed by it, and they get that across there, and then especially just this idea that we haven't really had Kirito deal with the fact that he's killed people, but all of a sudden it comes up here when he realizes that Death Gun is actually an SAO survivor very quickly, specifically one from Laughing Coffin, which was obviously the murder guild that they actually defeated that day. That was a really cool connection to set up his story, that Kirito's always been so confident about things and stuff like that, and now we have this idea that he's forgotten about the people he killed because he wanted to forget about it, and for him it's about learning to accept that, no, I did this, I have to remember it. I'm not going to let it ruin me, but I have to remember the people that I killed so that it shows that I care about what I did. That it's not just, I'm not like Laughing Coffin who don't think they did anything wrong, that murder in the game is different than murder in real life. That it's meaningful. And then on the other side of things, you have Sinon, who I think is a really strong new character to introduce. This idea that she, in real life, killed someone with a gun, and it was very graphic and stuff like that. With Kirito, it's like, obviously it's intense because of the way they set up SAO, but when he killed them, they just burst into kind of data shards. When with her, she shot a guy in the head and saw the blood and was right there. Had people looking at her, and the fact that she just killed people as like a child and has had to deal with this her whole life, growing up with a lot of people knowing that she kind of killed people, and the fear that naturally brings out of people and stuff like that. That's a really interesting backstory to set up for a character. And again, dealing with similar things, dealing with the fact that she killed people, but in a different way to Kirito, in that she is the one who can't forget it, is consumed in her normal life by it. It's actually affecting her badly, that bullies are using this against her to kind of take money from her and stuff like that, and she has very few friends because of this. And she's playing SAO as a means to kind of get over this fear, to prove that she can be strong somewhere even though she's weak in real life, and trying to bring some of that strength in game into real life. Really cool concept here, and even with Kirito it's kind of the same, that can his strength kind of get him through this situation, help him kind of recover the stuff that he has forgotten, chose not to know about. That is such a cool character concept to do, and how the two come together as like the key relationship for this arc, the kind of initial kind of rivalry kind of that develops between them, but ultimately kind of friendship and teamwork that comes from it with these two characters, and how they both help each other through their issues here. Really well done in that with Sinon, she realizes that Kirito is strong outside of the game and in game, but has this connection and has this kind of hope that she can also be strong because of that. He's also dealing with a similar thing to her. She realizes that early on, but can see that he has both sides of it where she doesn't, and has some confidence there. Like scenes like basically after the duel that they have, where he chops her bullet in half and basically he wins the preliminary bracket, and then they have that kind of moment where, without telling her that he's an SAO survivor, he basically says as much, and there's that moment of connection between the two for the first time, and she realizes that they're very much the same. He's dealing with these concepts too. Really well done. And then how Death Gun, when he's introduced, plays such an interesting role in this dynamic as well. Him using the gun that was the same model of gun that Asada kind of killed the robber with, and that being this hugely symbolic kind of item to just signify her being unable to forget, and then him being an SAO survivor, and us not knowing his kind of in-game username, and Kirito also not knowing, representing the thing that Kirito needs to remember. That this idea of like one is constantly reminded of one thing one needs to remember, and Death Gun represents both of those things to both of the characters. Just perfectly kind of coming together, really well done. Um, and then like in terms of the actual kind of mystery when it all comes out, I thought that was kind of done well as well, because you obviously in this kind of a murder mystery type plot where they have to investigate someone being killed. It's different than SAO where they set that up as just a kind of world device that if you die in the game, you die in real life. This is like, no, someone is out there actively doing something to result in people's death, and the mystery of how is he doing it and who is it. Really just very well done with the setup that those first mysteries which you need to establish that there's a murderer out there. You think that they're just random characters, but the way Zexseed then comes back in terms of being this character, like, ultimately this started because Kyoji became obsessed with the game because of the pressure he was under from his father to take over the family business, dove into the game all the more, and took the advice of Zexy to take his character in a certain direction stat-wise, and then Zexy changed his mind soon afterwards, and Kyoji couldn't turn the stats back, and that, because he was so obsessed with the game, he decided that killing would be a good idea, and you could tell that there's an influence from the fact that his brother was a member of Laughing Coffin in SAO, an SAO survivor. For him, he planted the seeds in Kyoji's mind that actually killing people isn't so bad because he did it a lot in the game. And you can see how these two brothers just gradually created this more and more destructive kind of mindset between the two of them, and they eventually started executing plans where they were killing people in real life and using this idea of Death Gun to kind of make it more known and make them more respected and stuff like that. Really interesting concepts, and like I was honestly, when I watched this the first time, honestly very surprised when Kyoji turned out to be one of the villains of the arc, because I felt like they did enough to kind of be like, okay, here's this guy, okay, so he's a bit overbearing on Asada with regards to wanting the relationship, but she seems to like him, but in many ways it's because she was so in need of a friend that she didn't really have, that she was more open to him, and like the audience, she also couldn't see his obsession with the game, and looking back on it now, you see that, wait, and in like every scene that they have together, he's always ranting about how his character isn't good anymore because of the stat choices he made because of Zexseed, and you instantly see the motive come into play there, and the little obsessive things that you kind of brush aside as just like, okay, young romance, whatever, are actually more serious than you think. I thought that was very well done. And then the actual fighting, the world of Gun Gale Online, we don't learn a lot about it. Like, even the novel, I don't think goes into incredible depth on what exactly the world and gameplay of Gun Gale Online is, in terms of, like, everything's about PvP as we see it in the anime, and we know that Sinon got her main weapon from a boss drop, but we never really see, like, how exactly does the hunting work in the game? What are the monsters like? And the setting for the game. It's post-apocalyptic, but that's about all we get. Um, so in general, I like the style. I like the completely different style than SAO, and then especially a huge contrast to Alfheim Online, fairies to like super heavy metal guns and stuff like that. I like that. I liked seeing gunfights in the show, but also still keeping some sword fighting in there and using the fact that Kirito is crazy skilled as this amazing skill for him to have in a game where people with swords don't use them that much. Um, and yeah, so the action scenes were well done. And in general, I like the way everything kind of came together. The tournament bracket worked well. You know, we didn't get introduced to all of the other characters because really the important ones were Kirito, Sinon, and Death Gun. The other players weren't incredibly important in terms of what the plot was about. The characters that we saw and got focused on were the important ones. One of the final things I want to talk about is just a lot of people complain about this arc for the lack of Asuna. And definitely, like, I'd agree, I would have liked to have seen more of her in this arc, but at the same time, it wasn't about her, and I thought it was. A lot of people see it as this kind of very dismissive thing that, oh, they brought Sinon in, and Asuna didn't have much of a focus at all. Why didn't they just have her go in with Kirito? But I think they explained it away very effectively because of what the kind of theme they're going for here. This idea that, you know, but the two characters are dealing with the fact that they killed people, but they can get past it because they did it to protect people. Also, that to protect her mother primarily, but in the process ended up protecting everyone in the post office, including a woman who was pregnant, and in turn, you know, the child that was later born. Kirito primarily, you know, with Kuradil to protect Asuna, but with everyone, with the other players, you know, it was to protect himself. It was to protect all of the other members of the game who weren't part of these murder guilds, and stuff like that. So I can understand why, like, he trying to protect Asuna, not wanting her to be at risk at all in case anything could happen to her, doesn't want to tell her about this, doesn't want to involve her in this and get her involved in the game. And I think in terms of her character, I think it's also a very fitting thing going into this arc that she, even when she finds out about it, doesn't actively try to get involved in the game. She goes there to support Kirito, but never like demands that she dive into the game as well. Because I think they've definitely set up this idea that after the Fairy Dance arc, Asuna doesn't feel as strong as she did in SAO. That her experiences with in SAO and what happened to her in ALO, what happened to her, have had an effect on her, and that explains why she's kind of primarily taken up more of a support role. She still is really good and goes by the name, you know, Berserk Healer, but you could sort of see that she's not eager to jump back in. And you know, they don't go into crazy depth on that. I think a little bit in Mother Rosario arc, they kind of explain that she did this situation, that she doesn't feel as strong as she used to, and explains the whole why she became a healer and stuff like that. So I can understand it from that point, and she does still play a role in the arc as a more supporting role. And as we go into Mother Rosario, we'll see that Kirito and Asuna basically switch roles. Kirito is that supporting role, and he's not really in the arc that much, and Asuna gets the focus. I think without Mother Rosario, I'd have a lot more complaints about this arc, but as it is now, her massive involvement wasn't really needed. I like that she was involved in the scene at the end, helping Asuna deal with what she needed to, and she was there to support Kirito in the hospital. Very well done. But if she was involved, I don't know how you would use her effectively, and I don't know how you'd make it all make sense. So I don't really have much of a problem there. So in general, this is a good arc, let down a little bit by, as I said, some of the pacing stuff. I feel they could have gone a little bit more in depth in terms of explaining the world a little bit more. Kind of like the ALO kind of fairy dance, kind of Kirito introduction to the game world situation. I felt they could have gone a little bit more in depth, but they kind of had to quickly get down to it. So, you know, Kirito straight away earned the money, just got the weapon, and straight into the bullet. There was no like practice stuff, no like practice raid or anything like that. But as it is, it's fine. So that's my overview of this arc. Probably tomorrow or Thursday or Friday, I'll get to starting off the next arc, which is the Excalibur arc. But for now, that's been the overview for the Phantom Bullet arc. Thanks for watching this video, and bye.